speaking of divisive things that make people angry and people don't know what to do with, we have the kind of themed events at sports games. Because this has been a controversial thing. We've talked about, again, I think previous iteration of the podcast, we talked about like Pride Nights. Like because there's a whole bunch of kerfuffle in the NHL, the hockey league, where eventually it's kind of the first league where teams were like, you know what? We don't need to have a Pride Night. Some of our players are uncomfortable. It kind of puts them on the spot to like wear the rainbow tape. And like, you know, if they don't agree with that, like it just, you know, there's this, players didn't want to be part of that. And if they backed out, then they felt like they're going to, you know.
Yeah, it's a bit too
join the
politically charged.
Like, there's just so much of like, people are going to be mad. So they stop doing that. And it just became this whole debate. And like other people kind of dug their toes in. And like, that's why we need them, because people are still so against it. And like, it just became this conversation. But kind of lost in the shuffle of some of that. And like, because some of the response is sort of like, why are we, you know, focusing on this group? Like, why don't we have family night? Or why don't we have like Christian night or church night? And like some of these things, like sort of how unfair it was. And kind of lost in the shuffle is that like, there are those nights. There are some of those. So there was a recent one, kind of the most recent one a week ago. The Baltimore Orioles, who are one of the favorites to win the World Series this year, good team.
Who knew?
They hosted their own faith night, and they just got a lot of attention. They're not the only team, as we'll see, that have some of these type events, but they're the most recent. For whatever reason, I think because some of their players are like really good and that were speaking out, it just a lot of more people were talking about this. And there's several things to this, because the night itself, I think it's notable, as we can get into, is like it was a thing that happened like with the game, but not during the game. As far as I know, there might have been stuff like, I don't know, maybe they played like worship songs or something. I didn't see all that like in the thing, but like for the most part, this is like, I'm guessing like an afternoon game. They had the game, and then like if you have tickets, you could stay. And like the coach, some of their star players came out. They had a band, some like non-denominational worship band came and sang, and like they kind of had like a little worship service. The players shared their testimonies, and like, you know, I think they had like 6,000 people or something that like stayed and kind of like had a little church service essentially. After the game. So again, a little different than some of the way that like the Pride Nights have gone. And even like looking to some of the history of these, because again, like, there's this narrative that like, you know, our culture only focuses on like the Pride event or this event or that event.
Right.
And they just completely neglect people of faith, which hasn't been true, because there's been faith, or what used to be sort of like interfaith nights dating back in baseball to like the 60s. And just sort of the numbers, like last year, 29 of the 30 teams hosted a Pride night. I think the one exception is the defending champion, Texas Rangers, whereas 18 of 30 teams hosted a faith night. So again, not as many had some kind of faith night, but like still over half the league had a night specifically for, again, like, they're usually titled like faith night, like sort of broadly, but like they're essentially like evangelical, like
Christian.
Yeah, I guess very, and the more evangelical, not even like the Catholic. It's it's not really openly kind of interfaith night. But I think there's several things to this. I think one says, I think it does expose maybe some like there's some of the, I don't know, like we don't like theme nights, but we like this one. Like there's some of that of like, we don't want to sort of just, you know, why can't we just leave it to baseball? Just let them play baseball. Like, oh, the shortstop's going to share about Jesus. Like, this is the best thing that's happened all month. Like, you know, there's some of that.
Which we saw, like, not to bring it back to the Olympics, but we saw a lot of that at the Olympics. It was like, I'm boycotting the Olympics, except for that runner. And she was so like bold in her faith, and we need more of that. And it's like, okay, like you want more of it, or you want to boycott it. Like that's sort of the two.
And even just like there's a lot of anger about, you know, there's the Pride nights, there's not faith nights. Then there is faith nights, and then like everyone's like, okay, and they move on to be mad about something else. Like,
right?
Like, did you really just want that, or were you just mad at this? Like, you know, so there's some of that. But I think just sort of in general, I think why these events have become controversial is because they're messy. Like, I think there isn't agreement as far as like, can you even do these in a way that's like healthy and, you know, promotes unity or, you know, understanding a community, or like by nature, are they just going to be divisive, politically charged things? And I think maybe a side point, if we can get into, is this sort of like, I think how they did this one might be a template for a better way. But what are some of your initial thoughts for this?
Yeah, I think how they did it is certainly, I think perhaps a template for just, theme nights going forward. And I think I think the thing about it is when you do theme nights on things that are already quite controversial, like pride nights or faith nights, or I don't know, I'm sure they don't do like openly political nights, but I think things that are more like social issues, I think you're already kind of stepping into hot water there. And so I think the way that you do it, I think there's a good way to do it and a bad way to do it. And I think we've seen like with the Pride Night, it seems like a very sort of forced acceptance of this way of life or of these values or what have you. And I think that's where we saw the pushback from like the NHL players last year. And I don't think that's a great way to go about it, regardless of whatever the theme is. And so I think making theme nights more of a background and optional thing. And I think maybe doing something special for that theme, after the game, I think would be a perfectly acceptable way. But I think what people would likely have problems with is like, okay, you did Faith Night, but it wasn't like everyone had to wear, a crucifix or, a fish on their armband or something to like, show solidarity for those of faith. Whereas if it's like a pride night, like everyone's kind of expected to wear the rainbow or do the thing to show that you're not a bigot or whatever. And so I think the way in which they do these theme nights, I think is going to be more important than either they just stop doing them altogether or find some sort of a consistent way to
Yeah, because I think
host them.
maybe some of the motivation. I think one difference to why it's not necessarily like apples to apples. Like I think it's close. Like is that there is this like, obviously like by definition like something sexual about Pride Night like
Yeah.
that and like which whatever. But like I know it's uncomfortable for like like if I'm a dad bringing my kids. It's not just hey I don't
Right.
agree with this lifestyle ideology. There's also just my kid's like 8 and I don't necessarily want to just have a bunch of people like where the focus is so overtly
Yeah.
sexual
Yeah.
in the same way that like other like military night or faith night or things like you might not agree with all of the implications of some of that but it's at least not like I guess like sexually charged or like
Yeah.
it's not
It's not maybe not as intrusive.
so yeah so I think there is a difference in that but I think you're right I think some of the like why the way they did this faith night is maybe different is I feel like a lot of the pride nights which is why so many of the players had an issue with it is like they almost seem like I mean like almost like indoctrinate like
Yeah.
this isn't just like to show that hey there's a place baseball is for everyone or hockey's for everyone like if you're this if you believe this faith if you have if you're gay if you're this or this race or have cultural history like there's a place for you in the game and like that's like I feel like that's what those events are supposed to be is sort of like hey we just celebrate we're all different but we all love baseball and like we're gonna show some of that. It's just the problem with some of the way that like, the Pride Nights have gone is it's not that. It's not just
Yeah.
saying if that's you, like there's a place for you here. It's like if that's you, like come and like everyone here, we're all gonna be watching and like we're all gonna fall in line. And if you don't, like whoo, like those reporters, like with the hockey, it's
Yeah.
like they were telling the whatever the Russian guy like that didn't want to play like go back and fight in the war, and it's like
Yeah.
well,
Yeah.
like because he didn't want to like come out like with wear the jersey and like they just attacked him like because he didn't fall in line like
Right.
and I feel like something like where the faith one seems like it's a little different is I think like I wasn't at the baseball games like maybe it was more forceful than it seems from what I read but like it seemed more like hey like there's lots of us here that don't know each other but we love baseball and we also love Jesus and like we're gonna give you a chance and here some of our players love Jesus and like
Yeah.
but it wasn't like every player came out and like had to stand there and you have some like atheist or like more Muslims player or something like standing there having to pretend to love Jesus like
Yeah.
it's
Yeah.
like, hey, the players that want to share come share no one's being forced to like the fans that want to come if you don't go home beat the rush like there's it's just sort
Yeah.
of to celebrate an openness and I feel like there is some value to something like that like I don't know like I don't necessarily need I love the San Francisco Giants like I don't necessarily need them to like
Affirm your faith.
affirm my faith
Yeah.
in order to enjoy the baseball game. Like, I feel like my faith is already affirmed in like other places. Like, so it doesn't necessarily interest me in the same way. But like, hey, for some people, it does mean hey, maybe if my kids are watching and their favorite player wants to go, there is value in some of that, I guess.
Yeah.
But I do think there is. It can be done. It seems.
Yeah.
It's just sort of if humans will get in the way of or not of like just sort of making it political and I do think there is a sense of like if we are gonna support this, then like I mean not everything goes, but we can't necessarily just sort of like
Yeah.
stick to baseball unless you're talking about Jesus. Like
Right.
I think that's I don't know. There's some double standards there that
Yeah.
it's like, but I do think we can say, hey, there's a way to do it that can just sort of be a gather with other people like you, sort of embrace this, share this mutual thing that you have in common, and baseball together, like in a way that's not like come here and we're gonna like
Yeah.
convert you to our ideology. But again, let us know what you think of that or maybe if you've ever attended one of those faith nights. I know. I believe we live in Atlanta and our Atlanta Braves. I think they are one of the teams that does host a faith night every season. I've never gone, but so if you have attended one of those, maybe, hey, let us know what you thought. Send us a message, comment in the comment section below.